Hi, this is Harriet Grayson, your host and the producer of Community Culture Showcase. And I always like to give my audience a little bit something different. Something different. Look at my hat. So you think to yourself, well, I'm not someone who generally has props, but today we're going to have a really interesting event. We're going to have a reading from actual Civil War love letters. So it's a great opportunity. I have with me the compiler, I can't say really author, the person who's responsible for compiling these letters, and I also have with us an actor who's going to read some of the letters. What we have basically is two characters, a man and a woman, husband and wife, and the husband went off to the Civil War. You remember when that is, folks, right? 1863, actually started 1861. And so we're going to have this great adventure. Now, I am not in possession of any Civil War wardrobe. So all I could do was find my derby hat. So you'll allow me to wear my derby hat while Tom, the actor, will be wearing an actual Civil War hat. And Lisa is just going to give us some information and pose as our narrator. So without further ado, Lisa,
Yes.
Tell us what we have here.
You are about to travel back in time. These are the actual Civil War love letters of my great-great-grandparents that I found in my mother's attic in about 10-15 years ago. About 150 letters between a husband and wife. My great-great-grandmother was 17 when he enlisted. She was married to him when she was 15. So he enlisted despite his father begging him to stay out of the war. He enlisted and she went to live with her parents. And what we're about to read are their letters, excerpts of their letters back and forth. And I got the idea to do this as a play, as a reader's theater, really, when I saw Van Johnson do the play Love Letters. You know, Van Johnson was still alive when I saw him perform it in a local community theater. And he was playing a young boy that grows up, and he was pretty old when he was reading it. So it's really something that it doesn't matter your age. You can read these.
Right, because I'm certainly not 17. I would like to get back there, but I'm not going to be 17.
Well, I often play Nancy, my great-great-grandmother, and I, try to get my audience to dispense with reality. And this is all these letters are in my book, Ever True, which was published by Heritage Books several years ago, and that's all of the letters, about 150. Right. The reason I call myself the author is because I did write narration in between all the letters so that you could know what's going on.
Right, so you've done some research.
Oh, it took me about 10 years to write this book, going to battlefields so I could visualize what they're talking about, talking to historians from all over the country and the National Archives, going down there, looking at records, war records, finding out who went to jail, and for, not always for such good reasons.
Right.
I mean, noble reasons anyway. I was really afraid I was going to get in trouble when this book came out, because you'd be shocked how many people are sleeping with people other than their spouses and stealing and not just raiding, not just doing what they were allowed to do war-wise, but other things. Some of them very violent. But anyway.
Very good.
Very eye-opening.
Yes, and I think you mentioned to me that these people came from upstate New York.
Yes, he immigrated here from Ontario.
Okay,
and,
Canadian. All right.
That's why his father's begging him, you and your brother get back over here, and but they didn't. They both enlisted.
Okay.
And lucky for me, because I'm still relatively new in this area, like 3 years, and I haven't really found a lot of actors willing to just do it at the drop of a hat. But luckily, I have Tom here, who I met recently, and I heard him read some of my great-great-grandfather's love letters, and I thought, oh my gosh,
perfect.
I really enjoyed him, because he just happens to say it the way I picture my ancestor would have said it. So he was good enough to agree to come on the show.
So what we're going to have for my audience, what we're going to do is that I will portray Nancy, her great-great-great-grandmother.
Two greats.
Two greats. Tom will be Charles, who is your great-great-grandfather.
Yes.
And to make sure that we get some sense of the flow and the war and what was going on, Lisa will actually portray, or actually just be the narrator.
I will be the narrator. This is some of the blurbs that were in my book, but I have a part for the narrator. The show is only very few letters compared to all of them, but I tried to pick a good representation of what was going on. for the whole war.
So this is my first theatrical presentation. We've had some theater groups on, but I'm gonna be an actor today.
You're going to be an actress, so shall we begin?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And go narrator.
All right. It is 1862 and war fervor is high. It has been over a year since the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. President Lincoln asked for an additional 300,000 men to serve in the Union Army for 3 years. When the son of Secretary of State Seward organizes what is to become known as the New York 9th Heavy Artillery in the summer of 1862, Charles McDowell, recently immigrated from Canada to upstate New York, enlists despite his father's frantic pleas to stay out of the war. After learning the basics of a soldier's life in Auburn, New York, Charles is roused at 4 a.m. on September 12, 1862. Leaving behind his 17-year-old wife Nancy with her parents, Charles McDowell begins the greatest adventure in his life as a private in the Union Army. But he begins it quietly because they march past Lieutenant Colonel Seward's home on their way to the train station, where Seward's young wife and newborn child lay sleeping.
September the 13th, 1862. Dear wife, we started from Auburn Friday morning at 8 o'clock, and we was in New York Sunday morning at 6 o'clock. We was met with great cheers all the way along. We were stationed right near Broadway, and it's the liveliest place I ever see. They have the most ways for making money you ever see. This is a beautiful place. We had 2 girls come and dance for us today. They both danced and played on the accordion all at once. The nicest I ever saw. I want you to write and let me know when you started for home. I looked for you all the next day. I didn't know whether you had gone or not, but it was the lonesomest day I ever saw. I hope I will never feel so again. Our guns have just come in, and I think we'll start right off. Your ever true and affectionate husband, Charles McDowell.
Charles's regiment heads to Washington, where the men enjoy sightseeing and watching the construction on the Capitol building. Yet the excitement dims for Charles when week after week he receives no letter from Nancy.
October the 10th. Dear wife, something seems curious that I don't get a letter from you. I begin to think that you have forgotten me already. You know what you said before we parted, and I know your word to be good. Most all the boys has got a good many letters, and they say you have forgotten me.
Dear Charlie, your letter has come at last. You said that you thought I had forgot you, but I never will forget you, the longest that I live. I have written a great many times, and I am not to blame if you not get them. Old Courtright done well when he got married. His wife come to him the other day, and she was so drunk that she fell down behind the stove. She lay there a long time. They have got the story around that Hank Converse's wife slept with Bert a week or 2 at Auburn.
Despite the grand life enjoyed by Charles, sanitary conditions are so poor that he contracts the deadly typhoid fever, the same illness that had recently taken the life of Lincoln's little son Willie, as well as Nancy's older brother John. In an effort to save Charlie's life, Nancy sends him several home remedies, such as peppermint oil, but warns that taking too much of it will give him the piles. That is, hemorrhoids.
Dear Nancy, I'm gaining pretty fast. I think I'll soon be able to do duty. We have Seward down here about every other day, and sometimes he fetches old Abe with him. He looks about like any old farmer. Our boys is laying around today. Some is writing, some is sleeping, and some is running around. Goodbye, Nancy. I often think of you.
Dear Charlie, I am very lonesome here today. If you was here, I wouldn't be so lonesome. I don't like sleeping alone. I kick around like everything. I wish she was here to help fill up the bed. From your true and affectionate wife.
November the 28th, 1862. They say that Burnside sent a dispatch this afternoon to Lincoln and wanted to know if he should burn Richmond. I think he's going to do something. There's a considerable many of the boys sick, but I've never felt better than I do tonight. But I ain't very strong. These doctors don't know nothing. One of them is under arrest. If I took all the medicine they gave me, I think I would have been dead now. I had a double handful of quinine powders, but all I took was 3 or 4. I got bone set tea and one thing or another. I tell you, I believe in doctoring myself. I could write you a good deal about some of the boys, but then it's against our rules. Well, not my rules, but theirs. Because I ain't going to do anything that I'm ashamed to have them write about. I'll tell you when I come home. Goodbye, Nat. How I would like to see you, but keep good courage.
Dear Charlie, they are having a terrible time about Bert and old Miss Converse. They say that Bert told his wife about it. They say that when Miss Converse was to Auburn, she went and called for a room and then sent for Bert. Bert's wife says that she wished she knew what Bert was done before she went to see him. She would not have gone near him. We have killed a fat cow and hung it up. I wish he was here to help eat it.
December the 14th, 1862. I should like to get a hold of a piece of that beef you killed. I would hang on and growl. But then, what's the use of talking beef? We're fixing for Christmas. We're going to have mule soup, but that's nothing new. The boy's ears begins to stick up awfully. Old Abe in Seward was here tonight and said there was 5,000 of our men killed and wounded yesterday, just the other side of Fredericksburg. He says they are fighting today awful. They was carrying off the dead and wounded all last night. I should like to be there with you to spend Christmas and New Year's, but I'm afraid I shan't. Little did I think last Christmas that I would be way off here, venturing my life for the country. I must go to roll call now.
Dear husband, I am here alone, all but the cats. All the folks have gone to meeting, and then I don't like to go, so I have to stay home alone. I wish that I could come out there and stay as long as you have to stay. That would be just what I should like, to be with you, for I don't take any comfort in the way that we live now.
The regiment allows a certain number of wives to move in with their husbands while stationed in Washington. Charles begs Nancy to come. She does come and writes to her mother.
March the 8th, 1863. Dear Mother, we had got fixed up quite well. We live in a cloth tent, not quite as large as your kitchen. We have got a bed, a stove, and a cupboard made out of a box. We have got a big stool that 2 can sit up to the table with. I have got a wash dish and kettle and a water pail, and we have 4 tin cups, 2 knives, and forks. We have got 2 tin plates, 2 iron spoons, and a candlestick. We have got a bottle of pepper sauce. I have got Billy Wagner's teapot. It's the funniest little thing. It has got the spout on the side. Charlie can draw rations for me, so it won't cost anything for me to stay down here. From Nancy McDowell.
Charles's regiment is ordered south of Washington to build the largest of the Lincoln's forts on a bluff overlooking the Potomac River. Fort Foote will be mounted with heavy sea guns to guard the water's approach to the capital. Nancy determines to make some money.
November the 6th, 1863, Fort Foote. Dear Father, I've neglected writing for some time, but to tell you the truth, I haven't got much time. I'm detailed to work on the barracks, and nights I have to help Nancy peel apples. Nancy's in the pie business, pretty strong. She has a woman to help her a good deal of the time. She pays her 3 shillings a day. We sell about 70 pies a day, and after payday we could sell 3 times that many if we had them. I've traded my old watch off for a revolver, and Nancy is practicing on it. She's getting to be quite a marksman.
President Lincoln visits Fort Foote to watch a firing demonstration from the large cannons guarding the Potomac. Charles's regiment entertains him with champagne and oysters. As impressive as Fort Foote is, however, it's in an area so unhealthy it becomes known as the graveyard of the Potomac. At any one time, half of the regiment is sick with malaria or typhoid fever. Nancy's mother reminds Charles and Nancy that they are closer to danger there than in New York and urges them to get some religion. Nancy does indeed face death when she contracts the dreaded typhoid fever. She is rushed home to the care of her mother.
March the 8th, 1864. Dear husband, I am feeling easy today. The same day that I got home, them sores began to gather, and it made me almost crazy. They were gathering 3 days. I think that it made me some worse a riding so far. I had the doctor the next day after I got home. He said that the fever that I had caused the ulcer in me. He said it most always leaves one so. I suppose that you would like to know how I got home. I found Matt and Lyons. I rode home on a springboard. When I got home, I seen Pa stick his head out and went in again. Then Ma, she said, "Where's in creation did you come from?" They all think that I had the smallpox. I am glad that they think that, for then they won't trouble me until I get feeling better. From Nancy McDowell, you must keep up good courage.
I stay in the house nights, but I don't bake any more pies. It's too lonesome for me. You say you are lonesome. If you feel any lonesomer than I do, you must feel pretty lonesome.
You can't begin to think what the folks told me when I come home. They say that I got rid of a young one, and they said that I had the smallpox, and they said that I had a bad disorder. I think it is ridiculous to be talked about in that way, but I will have to stand it. But if all of them behave themselves as well as I did, I think they will do well enough.
Dear wife, I've got me a nice little silver. I don't know whether to send my big revolver home or not. I also bought me a nice accordion.
You said that you had a nice little silver and was a notion to send it to me, but you didn't tell what it was. Ma reckoned it must be a little woman, or else you would have told what.
Nancy will never return to Washington. In the spring of 1864, the 9th leaves the relative comfort of Washington forts to join the Army of the Potomac as a member of General Grant's 6th Corps. Grant's goal is to capture Richmond.
May the 19th, 1864. We are at Belle Plaine Landing, 10 miles from Fredericksburg. There is 10,000 rebel prisoners here, and there is more coming all the time. But if you would see the wounded come in here, you would think our army would be used up in a short time. But there is regiment after regiment coming in here, going to Grant. There's a hill where we have pitched our tents. You can sit here and see nothing but wagon trains and soldiers for miles around. We expect to start tonight or in the morning. We are waiting for the trains to be loaded. We have just got orders to strike our tents and leave. We're going to chase old Lee.
Dearest husband, I now sit down to answer your letter that I received tonight. I was very glad to hear from you, but was very sorry to hear that you was going into battle. I live in hopes that you will come off unharmed, but the Lord only knows. I hope there hasn't been any ball made to kill you yet.
The Army of the Potomac marches to a crossroads known as Cold Harbor. Charles's regiment will finally have their chance at glory.
June the 6th, 1864, near Cold Harbor, Virginia. Dearest wife, We've been fighting for most 4 days. We was relieved about 3 hours ago to come to the rear and rest a little. But we've been for 3 days where it doesn't stand up for a minute without having a dozen bullets sent at us. The first night we came here, we charged on them and took 1,100 prisoners. Some of our boys was so excited that when the Rebs jumped upon the parapet with both hands held up to surrender, that they fired right in them. Seward shows himself a man, not a coward. In the charge, he went right in. He took one rebel with his sword and knocked him head over heels. He got one leg of his pants, tore most off. He looked pretty tough. When we was on the march coming down here, I used to feel sorry for some of the women. They cried and went on awfully. The boys would shoot their cattle and chicken and pigs and everything else and go right in the house and take anything they wanted. Vanderbilt was shot right through the underarm. It's pretty bad. Hank Porter was just shot dead. I helped carry him out. I hope that they will give us some chance to sleep some tonight. From your ever true and affectionate husband.
The Battle of Cold Harbor is a tragic failure for the North. Grant's second assault is delayed, giving the Confederates time to dig an elaborate trench system. In less than an hour, several thousand Union men lay dead and wounded between the lines. Grant later wrote, "No advantage whatsoever was gained from the heavy loss we sustained."
Dearest husband, I heard the other day that you was wounded, but I hope that it isn't so. I was up to Alton the other day and heard the names read over of the killed and wounded. I expected that your name would come next, but it did not come. You better believe I was glad, for then I thought you was in the land of the living.
After the Battle of Cold Harbor, Grant moves his army to capture Petersburg and the railroads that supply the Confederate army. They encounter delays, giving the Confederates time to reinforce the city. A siege that will last for several months begins.
June the 19th, 1864, near Petersburg. Dearest wife, I tell you, a soldier's life is a curious life. Sometimes we're ordered to halt and put up our tents, and we just get them up when we're ordered to pack up and leave. I've seen some of the men drop right down in the middle of the road. They would be so tired. Sometimes the dust flies so that we can't see a rod ahead of us. We was ordered to make a change yesterday morning, but we got in front of their works and found them rather strong, so we had to fall back. John Dean was shot through the head when going out of the pit to make coffee. He died instantly. It's a rebel sharpshooter that done it. They are pretty good marksmen. We had a flag of truce hoisted twice when we was there to have a chance to bury the dead. We would go halfway to meet the Rebs and change newspapers, and they talk very reasonable about the war. They say if it wasn't for the officers, they would all be right.
Dearest husband, I was very glad to hear from you. Oh yes, I had almost give you up for dead. It is all I ask for in the world, that your life may be spared so that you can return home. I don't think that anything would make me unhappy when I could have you so near me and know that you wasn't in such great danger. But the Lord knows best, whether I shall see you again or not. My cousin, Stephen Wager, was in that battle and got his right arm shot off. He had it amputated in the shoulder joint. Miss Carrie don't hear anything from her man as he can't write. They have the story around that he is wounded. I bid you goodbye, hoping to hear from you again.
Nancy continues to receive Charles's letters describing his involvement in history-making battles, marches, and the destruction and theft of Confederate property. But Charles also writes of the mundane, the kind of information only a wife would be interested to know, like the time he is living in Southern territory with 2 Confederate women. Alarmed by this development, Nancy gives Charles a little lesson on the dreaded sexually transmitted disease, the clap.
July the 4th, 1864. Dearest wife, I ain't where I was last 4th, but we've got a nice place here for a day or two. There is 2 women lives here, an old woman and a girl, and they cook for us, and we fare pretty well. Before we guarded the house, other soldiers came before the women was up and broke in and took everything they had. They was left without a thing to eat. I don't know what she would do if it wasn't for us soldiers. We gave them hardtack and coffee. Goodbye, Nancy. I wish I was with you today. I will now write a few more lines to you. The 4th has passed. I enjoyed myself very well. That woman cooked me some more greens, and they was good. If it wasn't for one thing, I would be most tempted to strike a bargain with the girl. She's a real nice, clever girl.
I have just got the letter that you wrote the 4th of July. I don't think pretty much of that girl as being so clever. Hi, Thompson, he found some clever ones out there. The folks say that he's got the clap so that they can't go in the house because he smells so bad. They don't think that he will live long. The thought he was dead one day, the doctor had been fixing him.
That fellow you spoke about is pretty bad off. You talk as though you thought I might get in that way. But Nat, you needn't be uneasy about that. I don't think that you would think that I would do any such a thing. Anyway, if you do, you are greatly mistaken. What does the folks think about election out here? Here, the most of them thinks old Abe will get it again, and I think so, and I think the war will be settled under him as quickly as anybody else. The Rebs is waiting now for election. I think they'll come to some settlement after election. They would like to have McClellan in if they could.
General Lee sends 14,000 men to Maryland to capture Washington. The North hastily pulls together an army of less than half that many to confront them at the Monocacy River, approximately 40 miles northwest of Washington. Charles's regiment races from Petersburg to join them. The Union knows beating the Confederates at Monocacy is impossible, but they hope to buy critical time to allow Washington to prepare itself.
July the 18th, 1864, Washington. Dearest wife, I feel very thankful that I am alive to write you once more. We went to Frederick and commenced fighting, and we kept it up most all day when we had to fall back. There was too many of them for us. Our company is pretty small now. There's a good many killed and wounded and missing, and I can't tell you who all was wounded now, for there was a good many left in the battleground. I've had some pretty close calls. A piece of shell came and knocked the lock off my gun and broke the stock pretty well. Carpenter told me to throw it away and pick up another, and I picked up a nice rifle. I was afraid I would get overheated that day, for I was one of the last off the field.
Dearest husband, I am very sorry to hear that you were so near tired out, but I feel very thankful to think that you did not get taken prisoner. Lib York must feel bad about her husband Norman. They think that Bill Burt, Levy Dunbar, and Levy Allen is taken prisoner. They can't hear from them. I heard that Major Taft had said to his wife that if she wanted to see him alive, she was to come as quick as she could. She started day before yesterday. They think they won't draft around here. I hope that they will. Them old copperheads, I want them to go.
The Battle of Monocacy becomes known as the battle that saved Washington, for it did stall the Confederates long enough for the capital to be adequately fortified. President Lincoln drives out to Charles's regiment to congratulate them on their stubborn resistance at Monocacy. His carriage stops in the midst of the regiment, and the young men gather around him in great crowds. A tall lad from Charles's company crowds his way up to the carriage and hands the president the eagle plate from his cartridge box strap. It has a Confederate bullet sticking fast in its center. The young man says, "See, Mr. Lincoln, this saved my life at Monocacy. The force of the bullet knocked me down." The president takes the relic in his hand, looks it over carefully, and hands it back to the soldier with the words, "Young man, keep that for your children and grandchildren, for future generations will prize that as the greatest heirloom you could possibly leave them."
September 11th, 1864. Dearest husband, you spoke about the regiment enlisting again. I hope that you won't be so foolish as to enlist. I had rather go with half enough to eat, have you enlist again. Am here all alone today. All the rest is gone to meeting. I wish you was here with me. This makes me think of my dream last night. I thought I was out there with you, and we was up to Miss Freak's, and we had a good visit, and we were carrying on like everything, and I laughed so loud that it woke me up. I have thought about it all morning.
Now, you had quite a dream. I would have been glad if it'd been true. You said you didn't want me to re-enlist. You needn't be scared. I don't think I shall if you don't want me to. I shouldn't anyway, for all the money they can stack up. They say Hammond and his wife had a quarrel, and he has re-enlisted.
Charles's regiment is placed under the command of General Sheridan. Grant's instructions to Sheridan are to destroy the crops and rich farmlands of the Shenandoah Valley. No food is to be left that can support the Confederate Army. It was ordered that the destruction must be so severe that even a crow flying across the valley would have to carry its own rations. The rebels gathered to confront the Yankee onslaught.
September the 23rd, 1864. Dearest wife, we've had some pretty hard fighting with the Rebs. We whipped them awfully. We drove them through Winchester. There was a regular panic stricken. Their own artillery and wagons ran over some of their own men. We are still in pursuit. We have taken lots of prisoners and a good many pieces of artillery. Andrew Reinhardt was shot dead. John Falcon, they don't think he will live. I tell you, there's dreadful work through here now, but we are taking the Rebs on every side. You must excuse all the mistakes, for I expect to pack and travel every minute.
My cousin, Stephen Wagger, has got home. Poor fella. He has lost his right arm. Some say they'd rather been killed as come off as he did, but I would rather been in his place. But if I had been his leg, it would have been better. I think for now you have to cut all his victuals up on his plate. He can't help himself at all. They had another party last night. I think it is almost too bad to dance in such times. Miss Carey thinks that her husband is dead. She is flying around with the Courtright boys now, first one, then the other. I think she must think herself in pretty business, don't you?
Charles's regiment returns to the siege of Petersburg.
December the 20th, 1864. Dearest wife, we are out on the picket now, next to the Rebs. We have to lay low once in a while when we get to exchanging shots with them. Sometimes I think it would be a good deal rather be in a good feather bed and have you beside me than lay where we have only some brush struck up to keep the Johnnies from seeing us. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, with plenty of cider and lots of beer. You may take an extra drink for me.
Dearest husband, I have the stocking. Christmas is past and gone, and I am not sorry, for I am glad when one day passes away and another comes, for then I think you will be home sometime or other, if your life is spared, which I hope it may be.
There's a good many deserting. The Rebs are coming in our lines, and some of our soldiers are running over there. I saw 3 of our soldiers hung last Friday for desertion. Some we catched in the valley. We catched 40 or 50. I believe there's 3 to be hung every Friday until they all hung. There's been 6 hung, and there's to be 3 hung this Friday. I think I shall go and see them. I can stand and look on with a pretty stout heart. When I think the way they take the big bounty and dessert and take up arms to fight against us, that's a little too much to stand.
They are having a dance to South Saunders today at Tom Gulf's house. I wish that you were here to go with me when I see the rest all going. You said that you did not want me to forget you long. I guess that I won't forget you, no, never. But I do not want to spend another 3 years as I spent this one, nor in either. And anyone might be better dead than alive, so, don't you think? Miss Carey and one of the Courtwright brothers got John drunk and then got him married to some kind of a thing. But John says he will never live with her.
January the 1st, 1865. Dearest wife, old 18 and 65 has got around, and I ain't much sorry either. But time passes fast with us now. About 2 o'clock this morning, we was waked up by the yelling and shooting of the Rebs when they charged our picket line. You would have laughed to have seen us tumble out of bed. We tumbled over one another pretty fast. Some of our regiment got taken prisoner. I haven't heard exactly how many. My old friend Jeff is at home now. They say they think he will have to have his leg taken off. So Bill Horn was a-telling me. I helped carry Jeff in when he was wounded. He lay there on the ground till next day noon before we found him. Jeff said there was a Reb captain came up to him after he was wounded and commenced turning him over to search him. He asked him what he wanted, and he said, "Your money." And Jeff told him he would get it for him. He said he put his hand in his pocket and handed him his pocketbook. And the captain took the money and throwed out the pocketbook down. He would almost cry when he told me about that. He said he thought it was too bad after shooting him to take the last cent he had. They took lots of money from our boys that day. I could have made $1,000 if I had went around and got our wounded and killed and searched them. But I wouldn't do such a thing. But there's lots of them that does it, and the boys had lots of money then.
I feel very sorry for them men that was captured, but was very glad that it was not you. You must be very careful when you go on picket and not be taken. Poor old Jeff can't bob around as much now with one leg. He hated to have the Rebs take his money away from him.
It's getting so cold. But we had the good luck to make a haul on a couple of blankets the other night when we was guarding baggage. I find a man has to look out for himself here. If he don't, nobody else will. I guess I didn't tell you how we got some beef the other day when we was on picket. There was a cow deserted from the Rebs and came right by our post. She had a bell on. We catched her and tied her up and milked her. Then we held a court-martial over her and sentenced her to death. But we thought we should keep her till night so we could milk her again. And after we milked her, we took her out to one side and killed her. I tell you, the beef came pretty exceptional, and the milk too. Well, that's enough cow story. I think a good deal about you nights, Nat, when I'm walking my lonely beat in front of the Rebs, but I hope the time is not far distant when I shan't have to do that.
I don't think I would like to have your court-martial my cow, because I would know what the sentence would be. Levi Dunbar had a party the other night in his shop. He had this Lucy there. I heard he got drunk and he would hug and kiss her right afore the whole of them. He says he likes Lucy and can't help it. Samuel Thompson, he waits on Polly Ann Tyndall. The boys go with just any girl that they are mind to. They are scarce and there's plenty of girls.
February the 28th, 1865, near Petersburg. Dearest wife, I've just come off on picket. 2 deserters came in last night, a post or 2 above me. One of these men said he had a wife and 4 children, and they was a sufferin' for food. Our boys trades with them most every day. We trade them soap and coffee for tobacco and other trinkets that they have. They're awfully afraid of Sherman. He is a-going through the Southern Confederacy like a dose of salts. We cheer when we are on the picket line for Sherman. It rather makes the Johnnies hang down their heads. There's a good many of them disheartened and discouraged, and I am glad of it.
The Confederate Army is dying. Grant prepares to make his final move.
March the 15th, 1865, near Petersburg. Dearest wife, we have had orders to pack up and be ready to move at any minute. We may have a pretty big fight here. I guess we'll have to look out for the bullets before long, but I hope not. I don't like them little fellows. I've heard that Bill and his wife are about to part. They say she has cut around with the men pretty smartly.
Charles, with the Army of the Potomac, engaged General Lee and his Confederate Army in battles from Petersburg to Amelia Springs to Sailor's Creek and finally to Appomattox Courthouse, where General Lee, the pride of the Confederacy, surrenders on April 9, 1865. On the same day, Nancy writes,
Dearest husband, the cannons roar here tonight. I hope it is for some good news, for I like to hear good news. I hope the war will soon be over so that the poor men can come home to their loved ones. I think that it would be all that I will ask is to have you with me. I hope that I will see the time when I shan't have such trouble.
Upon Lee's surrender, the capital rejoiced, but the celebration ended the night of April 14th. Dr. Sabin of Charles's regiment wrote to his wife, Last night I was an eyewitness to the most appalling tragedy ever enacted in the history of the country. I went to hear Laura Keene in our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. Mr. Lincoln, accompanied by Mrs. Lincoln, entered the private upper box. The audience greeted him with prolonged cheers. Just as the curtain was rising in the 3rd act, the sharp report of a pistol was heard in the direction of the president's box, and immediately afterwards a man jumped from the box upon the stage with a drawn dagger in his left hand. As he reached the stage, he cried, Sic semper tyrannis, and immediately he ran along the footlights and fled the theater by a back entrance. Someone said, The president is shot. I ran immediately to the president's box. As soon as I saw the wound, I saw there was no hope. Some brandy was brought and given. He could not swallow. The bullet entered the head behind the left ear and penetrated the brain. He was carried to a private residence across the street. Mrs. Lincoln was nearly crazy, and as she followed from the theater, she cried in frantic words, Oh, my poor husband! Oh, my poor husband! The president, of course, was entirely unconscious and remained so until he died at 7:30 o'clock this morning. An assassination attempt was also made upon Secretary of State Seward. Lewis Powell entered his Washington home and stabbed him and one of his sons several times. Seward, however, is able to recover and grieves deeply over the death of the president. It was later reported that P.T. Barnum offered $1,000 for the pillow Lincoln died upon.
May the 3rd, 1865, Danville, Virginia. Dearest wife, the Army felt very bad when they heard of Lincoln's death. I hope they will catch the hand that done it. I think they will get their just due. One thing is pretty certain, our fighting is at an end, and I ain't much sorry. I'm further from home than I ever was before. Some of those old planters is pretty well off. They own 500 Negroes. There's some good Union folks here, and some that would cut our throats if they could get the chance.
They think that Seward and his sons is out of danger. I hear that Johnston has surrendered up his whole army to Grant. I hope that he has. They say that old Jeff Davis is trying to leave the country. He has robbed the banks. I hope they will catch the old scamp. He has done enough to hang him if he had his just due. Lib York was over to borrow money of me the other day. She wanted to get her back black clothes on account of her husband Norman being dead, but I did not lend her any. She had ought to have been saving her money, as I have been. Then she would have some. Miss Carey can't get along without a bedfellow. Lou Williams goes and stays with Miss Carey while his wife is off someplace visiting her cousins. I thought that Lou was more of a man than that. Miss Carey lives in Alton, so he has it pretty hardy. I hope that he will catch the itch. She has got enough to supply the whole lot of them.
Danville, Virginia. Dearest wife, the woods look splendid here. They are in full leaf. I've come out in them to write. I hope that it won't be long before we can examine the same beautiful scene together. Little did I think when I left Canada that I would be gone for 7 years. Sometimes when I get to thinking about my native land and what good times I have had there, it makes a feeling come over me that makes me feel sad. A good many times I felt rather down. It looked pretty dark before me. But I have been favored with good luck, and I hope it will continue till I reach home. Goodbye, dearest Nancy, for a short time.
You said that you was in the woods. I would like to have been there with you and see the beautiful scene, for I love to be in the woods. They have drummed Miss Carey out of Alton. Lou Williams went the same day that she went. Lou and Miss Carey was caught in bed together. He paid off in counterfeit money. They laughed at him and said that was pretty cheap. I hope that he caught the itch off of her. Then he would get the worth of his money.
In May and June, the remaining Confederates surrender. Charles's regiment is transferred to Washington. Charles did not make it home in time to celebrate the 4th of July with Nancy, but it wouldn't be long after. Charles and Nancy build a home in a little crossroads called Alton, New York. They have 2 children, first a girl, then a boy 13 years later. Charles dies of a heart attack in his 70s in 1913. Nancy outlives her husband by 18 years. Suffering from a lingering illness, she spends her final months rocking in her chair and looking out the window. Perhaps she is waiting once again for Charles to come to her. One afternoon, Nancy falls asleep in her rocker before the window and never wakes up. Her town feels they have lost a celebrity. Her obituary states, Mrs. McDowell is dead. Shook hands with Lincoln. With the death of Mrs. Nancy McDowell, the town of Saunders loses the distinction of having a resident who could have boasted of shaken hands and talked with the martyred Lincoln. Nancy is buried beside Charles at the bottom of a slope across the road from their home. Although their final resting place isn't the feather bed that Charles had imagined for them, their headstone is engraved with a verse referring to lovers spending an entire evening together, until the day break and the shadows flee away. Charles asked Nancy to save his letters. It is unusual that he, a soldier in several battles, is also able to save hers. As a result, we have this account of love, sacrifice, and bravery. Despite the wars, infidelities, scandals, and ever-present threat of death, Nancy and Charles were devoted to each other and to our great country, the United States of America. Charles and Nancy were ever true. And that is it.
Well, that was better than it. I think, first of all, it's unusual, one would think, to get the common man as a regular soldier rather than a general or the son of somebody who's a general, to have these letters and have them collected and kept. You don't actually, I mean, I don't know that was the thing that was done.
Well, at the beginning of the war, he asked her to, he's a real storyteller. I mean, he loves to tell stories. And he asked Nancy at the beginning of the war, save my letters, I'm going to save yours. What I don't have in here is also all the letters that are in the book, included in the book, are letters from his father, his grandfather, brothers, all writing to them. He really believed in saving it, and he would keep mailing it back home, which is why I think that he was able to keep them, because he wasn't walking with these the entire 3 years. He kept shipping them back home.
Okay.
So they were in a safe place, really. I mean, Nancy's letters were worse for wear because those he was carrying longer until he shipped them home. They had teeth marks from mice. They were more weathered because he's marching, and because he wasn't taken prisoner, like many of his tent mates, who I'd really grown to have feelings for because I got so used to them. Like I said, this is just such a brief excerpt, but I got very attached to some of those people.
Sure.
And I was really horrified that Nancy wouldn't lend money. Remember for when
she was supposed to have saved her money, like Nancy had saved her money.
So, and this is kind of the reputation Nancy had. Like, I always grew up knowing that Nancy was a tough old lady. And my great-grandmother didn't like having to live with her. And these are things I knew about. And that rocking chair that she died in was still at the family farm. And and they put it in the attic. And I used to go up and as a little kid and look at that chair and imagine that it was rocking. You know, I would scare myself to death and run back downstairs. So when I found out that she had in fact died in that rocker, you know, it was just great to be able to put this in as the narrator.
No, I think it's just marvelous because it gives a picture to, obviously none of us were alive then, but it gives us a picture of what life was really like. Certainly the parts we read today about being on the battlefield. I don't think there are many people that actually know that wives came and were actually on the battlefield. Look, I teach kids who are middle school age. They can't even tell me when the American Civil War took place. So it's amazing to have this kind of history. And you know, it's great that you go around, not only on my show, but you actually do theatrical presentations in front of live audiences about this materials, and it's good, it's important. Show everybody the book again, and it's important that people know that they can get this book and
you can get it on Amazon.
Read it.
Yeah, that's probably about the easiest way to get it, or through the publisher, Heritage Books. And then you'd have the full collection of letters and all the narration. And I do include images from different battlefields he was in, images from his stationery. A lot of his stationery was beautiful that he bought. It would have the White House on it. It would have a bridge. Oh, we crossed over here. Some of them were in color.
Wow.
Beautiful. Some of them were just on the backs of her letters to him because he would run out of stationery when he's marching and fighting. But anyway, so it was a very interesting collection.
Teachers and anybody involved with trying to let students learn about, you know, sort of like living history. Let the students learn about what it was like to live in those times, what people really did have to sacrifice. And I mean, he talks rather coldly about all the people getting shot and dying and being taken prisoner, but it was in fact, you know, it did wear down on him. There were passages.
It was said, you know, like that he was never the same after the war. I mean, this is what my family tells me, that he was used to be a very, you know, jovial, happy-go-lucky fellow, and he was never the same after the war, they would say. He seemed fine in the letters.
Right.
But I guess, you know, it just wore on him because it was endless, the marching and the fighting.
And he
did get sick.
Yes,
he got typhoid
disease.
fever. She did. They both survived it. More people died of disease than of actual bullet wounds. And so one school uses it just for the diseases alone at that time, because she was constantly talking who's dying.
Right.
And of what, you know.
No, this is wonderful, and it's great that you've been able to do this. I hope that people who want to teach history, or people who are Civil War buffs, that they all take this opportunity and purchase this book. And certainly for, again, for teachers, it's a wonderful way to teach students about the Civil War. Here, you know, we've got a million kids who have no idea when the war was fought.
And to think that she was 17 when he enlisted, and that she was 17 when she's down there in Washington baking pies for soldiers and learning how to shoot. You know, when my daughter was 17, she was upset because her cell phone wasn't like everyone else's. Hers flipped or didn't flip or whatever the style was. But yes, I do go around to schools. I will be doing a presentation on this at the Ledyard Public Library. That's coming up. So different libraries. If people check my website at www.authorlisasaunders.com. They can click into my events, and it'll let you know when I'm having either a play or doing a talk about what it was like to write this book. Because, like I said, it took me 10 years.
Right.
I took a couple years off, but instead of my kids going to Disney World, they were going to battlefields.
Sure.
And my daughter complained. One of them loved it, and the other complained.
Well, I was just recently on my way to a wedding in North Carolina, and we stopped at some Civil War battlefields in Fredericksburg, Chancellor, and so yes, to get a little piece of the history, and it was wonderful. I mean, it really was wonderful to see. Now, of course, they're nothing more than meadows and fields, and maybe a lift here and there. And several years back, I had the great privilege to go to Gettysburg and get a private tour of the battlefield. And again, it's a way to live history, and it's so important for parents out there to give their kids some understanding of our history. There is nothing more important than people learning about the American Civil War, which helped to define our country in a significant way that is completely lost. Maybe you're lucky if a kid knows something about the Second World War, but really what defined the country and made the country the way it was certainly what happened at the American Civil War, what caused it. It wasn't simply states' rights. There's a whole issue of slavery, which we just don't talk about, but in fact is very essential for us to understand the whole character of the American person and the American history is part of this issue of what led to the Civil War and slavery, and the importance of Abraham Lincoln and his assassination. And then because he then becomes assassinated, what happens to the country itself in terms of the man who then assumes the presidency, his impeachment, and then what follows with Reconstruction. So I think living history in something simple like letters is a very effective way to get teachers may not even know things, to learn about our history, and this is the best way to do it. So I strongly support your efforts. I hope all of my audience will get busy and contact Lisa. I thank Tom very much for dressing up today and being our great Union soldier who saved the Union Army, saved the country.
Oh, shucks, it was nothing.
Luckily didn't get the clap, although it was all over. So anyway, so this is my program. I love it. I hope you will see it and make sure everybody knows about it. And we hope that you'll come back. We have other kinds of events coming up. And if you're an organization out there and you have a fall event, we know there are lots of wonderful things happening in New England in the fall. Let me know so that I can put it on my show, and we will, it's graceandharriet@gmail.com. Get in touch with me. Let me know about events that are going on in your community. If you're a librarian out there, let us know, because I know our public libraries out there have been just instrumental in getting authors out there and people like Lisa out there to tell a story. So on behalf of my guests, I want to thank you again for coming, and thank you very much for joining us today.